It is 8 o'clock.
Yes.
We are live, according to StreamYard here. Good morning, Raj.
Oh, morning, Pat. How's it going over there?
Well, I had some kids, or one of my kids homesick this week from
Oh,
school, and, nursed him back to health and took care of him and got him back to school. What's the thanks that I get? I wake up this morning with his cold.
like I call my kids petri dishes. So yeah, we're right there. We're right on the same page.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So,
so Pat, while you were nursing your son, I keep talking about this. I feel like every post I do, every time I get on the phone with somebody, I complain about this, but I fell into a rabbit hole yesterday for many hours with nothing to show for it. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today.
experience. I'm sure you gained experience in something.
Sure. You know what I learned? Here's what I learned. I learned that companies, big and small, really struggle with this idea of who their ideal customer is, what problems they're solving, and what indicates that that customer is having that problem. And then
Yeah,
being able to execute that using a platform. That was like a mouthful, but I feel like that's what I walked away from. It was a lot of, in my PMs, like PMs talk about this, but there's a lot of scope creep when
mm,
it came to defining that. And so I
yeah.
spent many hours working through that. I don't want to do that again.
Well, it sounds to me like it's this whole concept of go-to-market engineering. That's kind of come around with some different platforms, and Clay is a good example of that, and kind of the platform that kind of coined the term. Common Room is another platform that again, it's looking at signals,
Yeah.
and there is kind of a science to it, and understanding the signals that your prospective clients are putting out. But to your point, you have to know first who your potential clients are and get really good on the ICP, and then you go down this signals path, right? And try and see when these signals get triggered, and time your outreach.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges for smaller companies is, so I think about like, okay, Clay, you're like actually orchestrating once you have that knowledge, right? There are other platforms that are promising you market intelligence to help you really understand your customer. And I get where I go, like where I get to myself, we're kind of have a smaller operation, is as a smaller business, if you want to leverage all this, the promise of all this technology, how much are you going to end up forking over every month?
Yeah, yeah. You know, and I promised myself I was going to do a some house cleaning here at the beginning of the year, and just go through my credit card statement and figure out what
Yeah.
I'm paying for that I'm not getting the value out of right now, because it's super easy just to be lured into, here's a new tool that's going to do X or Y or Z, and sign up for it. And quite honestly, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of really good tools out there, but can you really maximize the value if you don't invest the time and the resources into figuring it out?
Yeah. And making sure that like there's a kind of a core human skill set. Just focusing around, like just focus around sales as an umbrella. I will actually even put aside ecosystem partnerships, which I know like we're both really familiar with, but just that sales motion and the amount of sales automation that's out there with this promise. And I'm thinking to myself, hold on a second. For even your most experienced seller, there's some core human skills that you need to, embrace before you go and start thinking through like sales automation. And I'm just trying to wrap my head around, how do we take some of the best practices that like much larger enterprise level customers are taking advantage of these platforms and doing what they do, and they have whole teams devoted to this.
Yeah,
But if you are a smaller business looking to grow, how do you take those nuggets and leverage that on a smaller scale?
yeah, yeah. And I think that's hard for a lot of small business owners, a lot of founders, to kind of get beyond their immediate network and really refine what their target market is, and then scale up from founder sales to a more structured process. I've put together some flows that I think make sense, and I'm not a believer in, high volume cold outreach stuff. I just,
Yeah.
long term, it's not a model that makes sense to me for that small organization. If you're much bigger and you've got a huge addressable market, then you're going to find something there. But it takes a lot, even more process and focus to get up that type of high volume. I'm a big believer in warm outreach,
Mhm.
meaning leveraging your relationships, creating an environment by engagement and inviting people to content and adding value and being a recognized voice, and then recognize some of those signals as you're putting things out into the world. Look for those signals as they come back to you, and also it's not something you can do all of the time, and maybe you don't need it. Maybe you just need somebody to help you with it and help you keep it going, and outsource it a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of so what you're kind of coming back to is this idea of marketing, content marketing, digital marketing, right? And we see it everywhere in our kind of daily personal lives outside of our profession. We're all interested in different things, right? And we're all part of sort of these smaller communities and brands that are providing us with good content. You're right. Like that's a great way to, you create community first is sort of what you're saying. You're saying we're in the age of community first sales, right? Can't just sell to someone cold.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think creating that warm environment is, for the smaller organization, much better investment than trying to figure out the high volume type stuff. And some of the things that we've put in place were, for me, where it was a response to all this cold outreach that I get
Yeah.
that's done very poorly, but they promise to get 5 to 10 meetings on your calendar every week. And I don't believe they can do it. I believe you can do it. I believe you can put the processes in place to do it yourself with the right, as you said, the technology and figuring that out. I believe you can do that yourself and get that, your calendar booked with prospect calls. But I don't believe I can just, hand it over to somebody else and get them to fill up my calendar. But I think there is a process you can manage it yourself.
I like that. So I like this concept of the kind of the warm outreach. How do you create a warm outreach strategy? It's all around content marketing and content. So let's talk about content and AI. First of all, I have a gripe, which is I get that we have AI, and so now people are like just generating content left and right. But for the love of just my very oversaturated brain, ask your LLM to simmer down with all the wordiness. Less is more when it comes to content. So that's the number
Yeah.
one thing. That's just a PSA for everybody. But let's talk a little bit about what you've done to build. You're really good at this. Build a community. Like, how do we share that with founders, small business owners, solopreneurs, around building that community without it becoming something that you're doing all the time? Is that
Yeah,
can
yeah, yeah. And it's something I started, even when I started down the independent consulting path, is I reached out to other people who were on a similar journey, and started it out as really just kind of a roundtable. And we got 5, 10 folks, and we would get together once a month. I've got another former partner and colleague, Chris Bryce, dropped a comment here in the thread here. He runs some networking and mastermind groups that I've been a part of. So I've participated in some communities, and I've tried to create some as well. And so the community we have is partnering consultants, and
yeah.
believe it or not, there's a good contingent of people doing that. So I've just tried in the last few months to kind of take that to the next level, and just kind of add more value to that community and grow that. We do these monthly masterminds now. We do once a month spotlights on some of the technology vendors. I'm building out some newsletter approaches to kind of attract and amplify some of those communities that I'm a part of. And Yeah, and I really enjoy it. I like getting together with those groups. Chris, he runs runs one once a month. It's called the Early Birds, and
Oh, awesome.
for me, it's pretty early because it's 7 a.m. in the morning, and I got to start my day a little bit earlier than I normally do. But we kind of like this. We just get together in a small group and talk about what's working in go to market activities, and it's a lot of small businesses and independent consultants and things like that. That's a great community. But yeah, it's a great way just to kind of learn and connect with people. And I try and I'm trying to bring that type of concept now to the audience that I want to serve as well, through newsletters and events. So I've launched a series of workshops that we're focusing on various aspects and tools in AI and trying to help people level up with those skills as well. So I think just trying to find places where you can meet people. Yeah, there's other communities too that we're part of that are just kind of Slack communities, and that's fine. But I like the live. I like getting together and getting even virtually, right? At least we see people's faces and we have conversations, and those are the things that I try and facilitate.
How do you, and we can talk a little bit about like some tips and tricks about this, but how do you actually orchestrate that using, tools, using some AI? So like my example is, I realized sort of in a panicky mode yesterday, I was like, oh my God, I haven't posted on Substack, and I had, thank God, read a recent article. I think it was from McKinsey, and it really just sparked something. I was like, you know what, let me share this with my audience. It's an
Yeah.
interesting take on like AI strategy and like keeping it simple, which we're all about. So you have an interesting workflow around content itself. And if you can kind of walk through how you've stitched together all of the tools, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, sure. So we're live right now on Substack. I hope this is the first time we've gone beyond.
Someone let us know.
Yeah, exactly. So this first time we've gone beyond LinkedIn Live. So we're streaming on LinkedIn. We're streaming on Substack as well. I was trying to keep an eye on my phone and see if I got an alert here on Substack to let me know that you've gone live, because I'm following you. I think Substack is really interesting. You and I are both just kind of getting started there with our approach, but I think it is an interesting way to build community.
Mhm.
And they give you, obviously there's the newsletter, but there's the ability to go live with video. It's more of a social network, I think, than some other platforms. And I think, there's more opportunity for us to figure that out. But so I launched my newsletter on Substack, partnering with AI a few months ago. And my commitment to myself, or my challenge to myself, was just to at least get a once a week format and keep it going. And I've done pretty well. I did miss one here early in the new year, but I was working on the workshop stuff, and I wanted to get it out and get it launched. So I gave myself a little bit of grace on that. But I'm trying to keep people up to date with practical applications of AI. And it's for the network of partnership leaders that I work with and I've been a part of for a long time. It's small business owners, it's founders, it's there's so much hype and buzz out there in AI, and so I try to avoid funding rounds and investments and things like that, or even new model launches. Right? There's a lot of buzz, there's a lot of excitement, but what are the actual practical applications and practical insights? I spend a lot of time trying to help people understand how to level up, right? Go from, kind of where everybody's at. I go over and chat GPT and I prompt it and I swivel chair, right? I copy and paste from here to there. It creates an email for me, or it summarizes something for me. But how do I take that and actually apply it to on a broader scale, right? How do I apply that to all of my clients, or all of my prospects, or all of my partners, depending on the role that I play. And then I focus on tools as well. Here are tools that can help you do something, and I'll pick out one that I've been working with and I've been experimenting with, and then I'll give a couple of other options. So every time I come up with this stuff, I'm on my phone and then there's an article I think is interesting. I've got a workflow set up. I click a button and it flows through and it goes into Notion.
Yep.
and Notion builds up this queue of articles for me, and it summarizes those. And then once a week, I go in and I just do my content. I say, okay, this is the article. These are the 3 articles that I want. These are the 3 tools that I want. And then I say, create the draft for this article for me. And then I'm not a great writer. I'm a good editor. I consider myself a better editor than I am a writer. So,
Aren't we all?
yeah. And it's much easier for me to say, create a draft for me, and then I go in and clean it up and make sure it's in my voice. And I train the AI over time, and it goes back and it looks at all of the previous content that I put out, and it refines, the voice over time. But I go in there, and it's probably 75% now. I've trained it on what the format is and the things, and so I get, I've got a workflow, so it's all kind of set up. And if I just go in once a week and get 75% of it done for me, and then I spend the time and make sure it's good and it's what I want to put out into the world, that's kind of my workflow.
It's interesting. So do you use a Notion like extension on your browser? Is that how you're capturing the articles?
Yeah. So, I'm a big fan of Notion. I love the ability to just kind of create any type of database and any type of content. It's really flexible in that it's got AI built into it now that does some really interesting things.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm a big fan of Zapier as well. So whether I'm on my phone, whether I'm in my browser, I try and create easy buttons. That's kind of my approach to AI. Can I create an easy button somewhere that I can trigger a workflow that's got a bunch of stuff going on in the background that's doing work that I don't want to do, right?
That's
So
right.
I'm sitting on the couch, after work, and I'm going through my newsletters or RSS feeds or whatever, wherever I'm finding this content. I click a share button on my phone. It goes into Zapier, it goes into Notion, and it builds up this queue of content for me. And same thing in the browser. And I just trigger it from different places. I don't necessarily go through, the authoring process right now. I can add a note, right? Here's my thoughts on this content, this article, and where I want to go with it. Or I can just kind of add it to the queue and come back to it later.
Yeah. Have you ever experimented with creating, like you said, obviously we all use LLMs, but I have like a Claude project where I've sort of done like one standardized prompt.
Yeah.
And like maybe we can talk a little bit about that because it connects to the workshop that you're going to be doing January 30th, which I find really interesting. But creating those projects and giving the LLM a specific job underneath that project umbrella is really powerful. And that's sort of how I've been able to create almost like a marketing resource, that plus, and this is where I have not figured out the automation piece, but I love Notebook LM for creating like infographics. Now, mind you, because I'm a perfectionist, then I'll try to go into Canva and like do whatever I'm going to do. I really should stop doing that. It really needs to be distributed out. So that's my advice to the audience too. Maybe don't copy paste the Tolstoy novel that ChatGPT presents to you. But then on the flip side, please don't fall into the rabbit hole of Canva either.
I did that early on too. I created, a lot of white papers and content and things, and then I would go in and spend just as much time, if not more, in Canva, laying out, this, and then I discovered Gamma, and I haven't looked back. I'm happy to give it to Gamma and let Gamma come up with, the layout and the format and, generate, now again, it's more of an editing process.
Yeah.
Here's the outline of the content I want to put in there. Gamma, you go to town with it. I'll give you a template and what I want it to look like generally. I can create a document, I can create a website, and then I can go and just tweak and edit. Canva, I was starting from scratch, and I would spend weeks just trying to lay out the right content and get it to fit. And I know Canva's got some integrations and things and adding some AI. That was why I'm not a graphic or a designer person, so I was happy to hand that off to another platform.
Same. What's interesting is we're talking a lot about platforms. You mentioned that as you're sort of sitting on the couch, you're looking at articles. One thing that I've been really challenged with is, again, it's like you get sucked, which is the design of the platforms. They're meant to actually engage you, but how important it is for you to step back and try to understand, what's really going to connect with your audience, right? Like now we've moved up the funnel to talk a little bit about marketing, but that's a piece that like I had to take that step back yesterday and say, all right, like I've been playing around here in clay for X amount of hours, but let me take a step back and connect with what it is that I think is of value that we can provide and who that person is. Like, I'm talking back to drawing stick figures in my notebook and like write, all types of notes around their emotions, their challenges, who they are in their free time, like empathy map in
Yeah.
my notebook type
Yeah.
of low tech. So talk a little bit about that balance, because I know that I struggle with that balance. So
Well, I'll tie it back to where you were going earlier, which is on the AI LLM side of things. And so I'm running a workshop next week on Claude, and I'm a big fan of Claude. I think Anthropics is really focused on the business audience
mhm,
and the tools they're coming out with. You mentioned projects. I skills, I think, is really underutilized at this point. So what a skill is in my mind, and I'll get it back to where you were going with this. So you go to the LLM, you have PhD level expert on whatever you want. Um, they don't know anything about your business.
right.
So a Claude skill is a way that you can create a framework and an outline, and you tell the LLM, and you don't have to tell it every time, right? You can give it this skill once and you say, this is how I run my business. And you can give it, this is who my ideal customer profile is. This is the persona of the person I'm trying to reach through this business. And with a skill, if you define it there and put it into Claude, now everything that Claude is doing for you is taking that into account.
Hmm.
And you say, I need to write a LinkedIn post, and I want it to be about this topic. If you do that, without a skill in Claude, it's just going to go out there and generally say, okay, here's a post that you can put out on this. If you have the skills set up and you've trained it on who your ICP is and who your target personas are and what your business is all about and who you're trying to serve, you're going to get a much different output from that process than you would if you just go in and one shot a prompt on, hey, give me a LinkedIn article. Skills. You were talking earlier about just kind of the AI slop problem
Yeah.
as well. Earlier this week, so Wikipedia has been dealing with this problem for a long time, and they built a tool internally for Wikipedia that is to recognize AI generated content. Well, somebody took that and flipped it around and created a Claude skill that says, if I want to humanize content, right? If I tell Claude to generate some content, and then I say, I've given it a skill now that it has a humanize skill,
Yeah.
and I say, humanize this content now. So then it goes through all of these rules in the skill that say, don't say things this way, because that's a common way that LLMs are saying things. And so it's funny.
Got
I
it.
just added it to Claude this week, and the output you get, it's better, right? And
How could you not have shared that with the broader community? That should have
I'm
been
testing.
that
I'm
should have
still
been your
testing.
first text to
Come to
me.
my workshop next week,
I'm
and
there.
I'll give you that skill.
I'm there, but I don't want to talk about the limitations of working with skill, because you have to have the Claude app on your
Oh,
machine.
that's right.
I don't want to talk about
No,
the fact that I'm living in the 1990s with my laptop.
not true. You can add us, even if you're using Claude in the browser, you can add skills to it, and I'm going to teach you how.
Oh, I'm excited to see that. We're already over time, and there's
I
actually
know.
so much we didn't talk about, because I wanted this whole session to be about sales and sort of struggling with this whole process of like architecting your sales process and all of that, but we didn't get into so many things that we had wanted to get into.
I know.
Maybe we
I
need a
know.
part two. We need a part two.
Probably so. Probably
Yeah,
so. Let's get it on the schedule for next week. We'll continue the conversation.
for sure. And we should put a link to your workshop for everybody to check out, because I
Well,
think that's
actually,
going
let's
to
do
be
this. I've got a QR code here. It's going to your newsletter,
amazing.
the Connective AI newsletter. How about you post my workshops in your newsletter, and we'll have it covered off.
I can
Thanks, Chris.
totally
Good
do
to see
that.
you. Thanks for hanging in there.
Thank you so much, Chris. I wonder where my invite is for this morning meeting. What's that about?
Oh, I will hook you up. I will hook you up. Chris, I'll get Chris to invite you to the early birds.
Early birds, that's what it is.
Well,
I'll bring my coffee.
it's 9 a.m. for you. I don't think you're going to have a problem. It's the folks a little further west that have to deal with it. It's a great group, and we talk about a lot of this type of stuff, right? Um, we've gone through different tools and different go-to-market approaches, and we kind of just do a roundtable. And Chris does a great job of pulling that together. I will extend that invite to you. I'm sure he'll welcome you.
I'm excited for it. Yeah, definitely. I keep farmers hours, so I'm up. It doesn't matter how early the early birds meet. So,
Oh, cool.
all right.
Well, thanks, Raj. Hey, let's do it again next week, and we'll keep going from here. We'll see what kind of engagement we got in the Substack world, and hopefully that's something we can build up as well.
Yeah, excited for it. All right. Thanks. Good to see you, Pat.
All right. Thanks, Raj.
Okay, bye.
Oops. Cancel. Stay. I don't want to leave the studio. Oh, I got to end stream.
Oh, we're still live.